While a duel can be defined as a formal fight between two opponents, Dave Navarro and PADHiA are two like souls fighting the stigma of mental health issues through artistry and advocacy. Rewriting and reframing mental health as aspects of the human experience, they work to write a new narrative for mental health and addiction.
So it started with street art. Dave, when you saw the words, "Love me anyways," let's hear the story of this connection between the two of you and the concept of dual diagnosis that resulted. As it turns out, street art is not your only common denominator. So let's hear it. How did this start?
Well, I became friends with another artist, Plastic Jesus, who I was working with in his studio. PADHiA and Plastic Jesus used to share a studio space. So that's how I became aware of her as an artist. And when I saw the words "love me anyways," it penetrated my heart in a way that I hadn't experienced before. Being someone who suffers from anxiety, from PTSD, from a myriad of things that get in the way of connectedness with human beings. In addition, with my past history of addiction, it really spoke to me on the level of how difficult it is to maintain healthy, supportive relationships that are loving and understanding and compassionate when I'm in a state or having some difficulty or challenges. And that when I have found myself in those states, the people that are closest to me sometimes don't know how to behave and react at all. And the simple phrase, just love me, and I'm gonna cry thinking about it now.
Yeah.
But, just love me anyways, it really hit home for me. It was really powerful. And so, because I identified with that, because a lot of times human beings don't know how to support. They don't know how to hold space. No one's educated them and no one's taught them. And so it's one of those things that's not their fault necessarily, but the simplicity in the message really penetrated me, because that was all that was required. That's all that's required. Like, I don't need you to, I've got a little bit of echo, I'm sorry, but I don't need you to do anything different. I don't need you to treat me different. I don't need you to coddle me with kid gloves or anything like that. I just need you to be my friend and to stand with me. And so naturally, I reached out to PADHiA to purchase that piece, which is hanging in my bedroom. I see it every day when I wake up. I see it every night when I go to sleep. And we connected when I got the piece and became friends. And I think through dialogue and conversation and having a deep understanding of that, we both feel that way and similar, and really connected on that level, and
yeah,
it really started out as a friendship based on a very simple slogan that she created that really had a profound effect on me. And especially in the day and age of a lot of art, and street art is an image with a slogan. It's almost not to talk shit about it, because I do it myself and I love it, but there's a lot of what I call meme art. You know what I mean? Where it's like, it's a picture and it's a line and it's clever and it's funny and I love those pieces too. But this was it was black diamond dust on a black background, and there was no imagery attached to it. And it was just so pure and simple and to the point that I had to have the piece, and then I had to know this woman. And that was many years ago. And she has since become my partner in art and one of the most important people in my life in terms of support and friendship.
Gosh. The message that you sent me about that piece was one of the biggest honors, I think, of my art career, to think that I had said something that touched someone like you, and it wasn't me trying to think of something to say that would, you know, I could build a brand or make some money. It was something that I said that came from really my deepest suffering. So I did mean it on that level of like how everyone needs to treat me, but even before that, meant it towards myself, like, you know, because struggling with just this from trauma, dysmorphia, this, your experience of yourself is a complete distortion, and sometimes you just can't leave the house. And sometimes, like, I can't even answer FaceTime on the phone because I'm just like, oh, I feel like I'm swimming in this weird, terrifying body. And I spent so many years really unable to leave the house, and one day just have this moment of like, all right, what if all these feelings I'm feeling about myself and that I'm physically seeing, what if it's all true? So what? You know, can I love myself anyway? And it was like the biggest fuck you to all this. And there's just, there was freedom in it, and it came from such a moment of darkness. And I remember when Dave started doing street art and making friends with all the artists kind of here around in the circle. You know, everyone was really excited, and they were saying, "Oh, you've got to message him. You've got to meet him, and he'd love your stuff. He's really cool. He'll be nice." And I just thought, you know, first of all, probably the last thing he needs is another stranger hitting him up. But I just really wanted to see if it happened organically, and I'm so glad that I did, because it just started our friendship off on a whole other level, connecting over that phrase. And I thought, you know, I was just so wrong. I really, my catastrophizing mind instantly determined that we would have nothing in common and not become friends because our lives have been so different, and actually had discovered that even though the circumstances of our lives are so different, the language that we speak, because of the effects of the trauma and the struggles and the level of empathy and compassion that we have, and the way we can kind of like observe other people's nervous system and want to show up in a soothing way. Like, we just have a friendship that's so supportive and so deep. And I just love the story of how it started out over that phrase.
Me too. And, you know, I think another thing,
Yeah.
I think another misconception, and one of the things that I really got from the piece, and one of the things that I would say to other people that are struggling and have had similar experiences, is that, you know, I can step outside of myself and look at my life, right? And I can see that there have been areas of it that have been very successful, that where I've achieved a lot of goals and dreams, that I have actually exceeded them in many ways. And I'm very grateful for that. And I'm very, I feel so much gratitude for that, right? But a lot of people who do struggle think that there is a goal or an achievement or a thing that will fix all of that stuff. You know what I mean? And so I can speak from experience that there isn't. You know, like it isn't, you're not going to get the girl that fixes it. You're not going to get the record deal that's going to fix it. You're not going to get the show that's going to fix it. You're not, there's no external thing or successful venture that's going to make one at peace with oneself. And that work has to come from within. And you know, it's actually been, in my case, very difficult to find people who are compassionate and understanding and willing to hold space, because they do look at my life and say, what do you have to be upset about? What do you have to suffer about, right? But the fact is, it's nothing external. And it's, as PADHiA said, it's all nervous system related. It's all CPTSD, complex, post-traumatic stress disorder, dysmorphia, all the things that she listed, I identify with. And when we met and started talking about these things on a friendship level, like, we really realized that there was something that we could do together as artists that could maybe speak to that, you know? And the initial dual diagnosis concept, I was in New York City. I was doing street art in New York City, and I was also working, and we would talk on the phone every couple days. And it just started as a conversation where I said something kind of flippantly, you know, and that's one of the things that is amazing about how we work together, is that we listen to each other. We really listen. So she will say something, or I will say something as a matter of fact, off the cuff line, and the other one will say, whoa, what you just said right there, write that down. And so I just said something flippantly, and PADHiA caught it and wrote it down, and that phrase became the birthplace of what we're doing now, which initially started.
Oh yeah, it was self-care style.
Self-care style.
Yeah, you said you were you had to go to some event or whatever, and you were really in your anxiety and just all of that, and you said, yeah, and I was dressed up, you know, all self-care style. It was the funniest thing.
I actually think if memory serves, I was supposed to go to an event and I was all dressed up and ready to go and wasn't feeling safe, so I stayed home as a result. And self-care style, meaning like, I don't need to put myself through this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And however it happened, it was years ago, but that's what started this this apparel line, which was aimed at, you know, bringing these kinds of feelings and thoughts to the forefront of the conversation among people, and letting people know they are certainly not alone. And you know, this was several years ago, and there was much more stigma around the mental health issue. Now it seems that there's a lot of signage and people talking about mental health and doing what they can to support and help and understand it. But we are now delving deeper into the root causes of why people suffer, and PADHiA can speak to you on that a lot more intelligently than I can, if that's a good place to hand it off.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I was just gonna say, you know, something that we've discovered through our friendship, but also through the feedback we're getting with dual diagnosis, is that you'd think that people really can't relate to each other because you have infinitely complex stories and they're all so different. But while those circumstances, you know, are infinite in number, there's really just a very limited range of human emotion. And we've all felt the same feelings, just provoked by different circumstances. And so when we start to talk about the feelings that we've had, and then the ways that we are shaped in our life because of those feelings, and the dysfunctional patterns, and how we create more of those feelings. It's like we start to realize that it doesn't matter how different someone is in any capacity, even culturally, we're all having the same feelings. And so when we start meeting on that level, we can really start to support each other in beautiful ways. And I think going back to what Dave was saying a moment ago, it's true. There's nothing external that's going to fix you or bring you happiness. But I think in starting to weaving together a community of people that understand your specific human experience and where you're getting tripped up, and support you like on that deeper nervous system level. I really do believe that bringing those people in is what promotes flourishing. And it's a refuge from some things that go on in our society that are really, really toxic to mental health. Like our society basically does the opposite of support mental health.
Yeah, and one of our pieces, it's so funny that you say that. There's a lot of people in this space artistically that do their best to support mental health, right? But we have a piece that's coming out. You've heard the phrase "live, laugh, love," right?
Yeah.
And we did a diptych. One side says "live, laugh, love." The other side says "die, cry, hate." Because when somebody is suffering and they see a simple slogan that says "live, laugh, love," and they can't access that at all, it's alienating and isolating. Happiness is a choice. Tell that to someone who's suffering from deep depression. They can't choose that. So the diptych that we created just encompasses all of the human condition and is saying that it's all natural and normal to feel any aspect of this entirety of emotions. And it's not just this half, because when you have messaging that only points out a half that 90% of people who are suffering cannot identify with, that makes them feel more alone. And so we're trying to just expand and say, we're all human going through the human experience, and like it or not, there can't be light without darkness, you know? And the darkness is sometimes okay because it allows you to see the light at times. You know, you think about the phrase, "this too shall pass," you know, and typically everything does pass. But guess what? There's something around the corner that you're gonna want that to pass too soon. You know what I mean? Like it's
and even that phrase it's another one that's just so mainstream accepted, but it's so damaging to people who struggle, because the thing did pass, but it's still encoded in your nervous system. You're still holding it in your body. You still are living a lesser life. You still have a smaller feelings about yourself and pain and stuff. Like for a lot of people, things don't always pass. And that's something that excites me about our project is sort of looking at these things and actually speaking the truth about it. Things don't pass. Happiness is not a choice. You can't always live, laugh, love. I think it's exciting to go from that little tiny peephole to broadening the view to the truth of the human experience, and then hear how it's affecting people in powerful ways who've always felt so isolated and broken because of these mantras that are out there.
And I just want to emphasize that we're not speaking ill of people who present those mantras, because we know it's in good faith and it's coming from a good place. And, you know, so in no way are we speaking ill of that intention, because the intentionality is pure and loving and good. And it also, lots of people do identify with that, and it does hit them profoundly, and they are able to live that way. But we also know that there's a portion of the population that it doesn't resonate with. And so we wanted to offer that alternative and let people know that it's okay to feel human. And you know, we get messaged by so many people that are so grateful for what we're saying and what we're doing. And you know, fortunately or unfortunately, we get asked for advice quite a bit, you know, and the facts are that we're not therapists and we're not doctors, and we're just two more human beings going through similar things. And
we're all often in our own crisis at the time.
yeah, you know, and so really the only advice we have, or the only thing that we can offer, is what we're offering through our art and through our messaging anyway. Like, that's the stuff. And the manifesto, I don't know if you read that on the website.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so those are the tools and the things that we know to be true. And, you know, we are unable to, you know, work with others on a one-on-one basis, but what we can do is we can create from our hearts, which the process of creation and coming up with alternative ways of looking at this stuff really does bring us joy. And it resonates, it's seeming to resonate with a lot of people, you know. But in terms of, you know, getting the 12-inch DM from somebody who's suffering and wants me personally to tell them what to do, like, that's not, you know, I'm doing everything I can to tell you, you know what I mean, within this project, you know what I mean? And really, the things that I do, I've made very public, and I've been very transparent about it. I cognitive therapy, yoga, meditation, EMDR. I'm going to start getting into breath work. Like, there's a lot of things that one can do, you know, to try and combat. You almost have to create an army of your own self-care, and that's you know, an individually tailored thing. That there's no, you know.
Yeah, it's like running a company almost, where you have to have a staff to help you show up as the best version of yourself and invite that person forward. And how am I gonna make this person the most productive, stable person? We'll have to create this whole environment, and I need all these components. It's like a full-time management job sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, from the time I wake up to the time that my staff is done with its work, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You know what I mean? I gotta make coffee. I gotta yoga. I gotta meditate. I gotta do, you know, I got a number of people to reach out to, like, just to be at a baseline okay place, you know. And even on some days, all that stuff doesn't work either, because, you know, we get hijacked, you know. I want to move off of us talking about the fact that we struggle so much. I think it's very evident, you know what I mean? We also experience tremendous amounts of joy and have tremendous amounts of gratitude and a tremendous amounts of support and love in our lives. But when it comes to dual diagnosis and talking about what we're doing, I think it's important for us to be transparent about our backgrounds.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's, you know, I love how the two of you speak about this, and you refer to this spectrum of the human experience. You know, you're not one thing or another, that we are complex beings. And yeah, no, it's the work that you're doing is so important. And I think so many people hear you. I want to get technical for a moment. Just for those people who are unaware of the actual term dual diagnosis, what does it mean? Like, what is the actual definition of this?
I think it means you're a human being. You have different things that you struggle with that come up at different times, and what it technically means, I think, is that those things have been pathologized.
Yes.
You have a label, you have a diagnosis. It means, co-occurring diagnoses. And the thing that I think we've lost sight of is that a diagnosis, the intention of that is to give you greater understanding about yourself and in seeking help and some type of additional support that is afforded to you because of that diagnosis. But that's not really, that does happen to an extent, but really what a diagnosis does is creates terror, loss of hope, a feeling of damnation, and judgment and stigma. And destroys your self-worth, because you thought you were a person struggling with these things, and maybe you were very desperate to and curious and looking around, learning about how you can free yourself from that. But now you have this diagnosis, so just settle down in that label and make all of your life choices from that lesser place.
It's really like going in to sit down with a counselor, a therapist, or a doctor, and having him just flat out say, there are multiple things wrong with you.
Right.
You know what I mean? which is like probably the worst thing to say to somebody who's going through some stuff. I've spent a number of years in my early, in the 90s, I struggled with addiction really badly and been to a number of rehabs. And I was always dual diagnosis. I was always labeled as dual diagnosis, addiction, depression, or so dual typically meaning two, but in my case, it was this kid suffers from addiction and he suffers from PTSD and depression, right? And, when they spell it, it's DUAL, dual diagnosis, right? Because they're using the Latin two.
Yeah.
What we've done is we've changed the spelling, and dual as almost a conflict, a fight, one against the other. And if you look at our logo, which is a Rorschach test from Herman Rorschach, who invented these inkblot tests that were designed to calculate how a person is doing on a psychiatric level. They were told that there was no wrong answer in terms of what they saw in the image, but more times than not, if you didn't say, I see a Ferris wheel, you were locked up and you underwent really horrific treatments and shock therapy and things that were even more damaging. And our logo, people see two guns, and people see a moth, people see a butterfly, and all those answers are accurate. And it was designed that way. And so when we say dual, DUEL, and you look at and you can see the two guns in the logo, which would be used in a duel, right? That's symbolic of the battles that we put ourselves through. Like it's dual because there's two of us also in the partnership, but it's also that internal struggle of just the typical angel and devil on each shoulder, you know what I mean, pointing guns at each other, trying to win. So dual DUAL diagnosis is PADHiA answered that, and then how we've adapted it to almost illustrate what goes on within a single individual, right? there is a duel that goes on within the single individual. And then also, it just struck us as funny. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, and that's the other thing, is that we really try to have a sense of humor. We're talking
Yes.
some
Yeah.
really heavy issues here, but the fact of the matter is that, you know, having a sense of humor is another component in the arsenal to combat these conditions, you know?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
so we
Yeah.
try to approach really important, heavy topics with that lightness and sense of humor and playfulness.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's also, for me anyway, it's about not living as your diagnosis. It's about acknowledging, you know, because I see a lot of mental health issues such as depression, anxiety, PTSD, those types of things. I don't believe those are a disease of the organism. I believe they're a disease of the environment. And the environment that formed the person into someone who can't translate their spirit out into the world in a robust way, and instead is depressed and contracted and afraid all the time. The shame needs to be put on that environment, and that needs to be looked at. And there's a lot of serious conversations that I think need to happen surrounding that, rather than, you know, most of my life, I was told that, you know, I had this brain that's just chemically imbalanced, and it's probably genetic, and it's like having a heart condition. You just accept it and you just live with it, and you scale back on your dreams because they cause stress, and that's bad for you, so you live a lesser life. And I was living as my diagnosis and all the fear and worthlessness surrounding that, rather than living as my spirit, which is actually very creative and powerful and capable, but just needs special support because of things that I've been through. And when I look back over my life, it feels tragic, because all these years that I've spent believing I was mentally ill, like I actually was exhibiting tremendous mental wellness in trying to figure it out, trying to seek answers, trying to find people who could love me in the right ways and support me and make my nervous system calm down. Like I've exhibited, you know, all of the symptoms of mental illness, but my behavior and my beliefs are 1,000% mental wellness.
And that's a great point. And I know when I was like, wait, how are they spelling this? And I was looking at it, I'm like, oh, I get it. And I guess I personally, when I saw it and when I took it in, it felt like to me dual diagnosis, like sort of fighting the diagnosis, not saying I don't accept different things about me or about where I'm at, but rather to say my diagnosis does not define me, you know?
Exactly.
And I think
it doesn't have to win.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think one of the ways that just a very simple example of that is that had PADHiA and I not lived the lives we've lived, none of us would be having this conversation right now.
Yes.
Which is a tremendous victory.
Yeah.
All things for a reason, I suppose. I'm certainly thankful and honored to be sitting here right now having this very talk. You know, so I guess a broader question, you know, outside of the what it is, I'd like to discuss the how of it in terms of like mental health issues. Like, how has it become so stigmatized, and how do we unstigmatize it? How do we change that narrative? Thoughts?
We have a lot of thoughts. PADHiA, do you want to start?
Sure, yeah. The thing that jumps out for me first on that topic is if you think about the constructs of society, there is an overall agenda that everyone has to plug into in some capacity or they don't survive. We have to produce things and we have to make money and then we have to consume, and it's a cycle and it goes on through linear time, which is built into the constructs of society as like the fundamental aspect of it. And if you can't fit into that, or you value other things, or you're different, or maybe your energy is such that it just creates things that are outside of those constructs, and that's what makes you feel alive, then you're considered mentally ill. And then that's where the stigma comes from, because you're not fitting into this structural machine that has to keep moving forward so that, you know, our economy can remain what it is. And I've been reading a lot recently about indigenous worldviews, and it's just like, oh my God, like the way that I wouldn't even say that they had a society, but the way that their culture is structured is so based on each individual knowing that each individual has their own experience of an inner world and of time, and it's not linear, it's often very different, and then valuing that, seeing that's beautiful within each person, and then the way these people come together in these little like pods and create a little reality together, and they live in that, where nobody's saying this is how it is, you must plug into this, or you're sick. You're building like a, whatever you'd call it, a psycho-emotional structure and all these values to live in together. And that is, to me, like the conditions under which I would flourish. You know, but you put me out in this world and I'm instantly mentally ill and then therefore stigmatized.
And I think also adding on to that, when it comes to the stigma around mental illness, I think that it is shifting. I think that the world is, especially after the past 2 years, has become very, very aware of how prevalent mental struggles are and how rampant in our society they are. And so I have watched the world become less stigmatizing around the subject and talking about it and being open about it. But now it's time to have the conversation of how do we coexist and live with this, because it's very easy for someone to put hashtag mental awareness health, you know, mental health awareness day, and like think they're moving the needle. But the fact of the matter is, this isn't a hashtag. And so what PADHiA just outlined with the indigenous societal constructs and what is happening in those scenarios is community, is understanding, is patience, is compassion, is unconditional love and acceptance. And so those are the things that I think that we're seeing now, a shift in the healing space, in the spiritual space. Things are starting to lean more that way, which is a beautiful thing. But yeah, I mean, so when I hear it, I struggle when I hear the word stigma, because you see so much signage and people talking about mental health these days. You know, it's almost become, I hate to say it, it's almost become in vogue to become an advocate, right? Yeah. But you can become an advocate and that's wonderful, but there's the solution side of it that's missing. That, and I'm not talking about solution in terms of, you know, seeing a therapist or a psychiatrist or whatever you need to do to get through your day, whatever, but just on a sociological level, that, you know, we need to start talking about the solution So
Yeah.
I do feel like we're headed in the right direction, which gives me a lot of hope.
Well, yeah, and like you were saying, Padilla, too, is that, talking about this construct in our society. So maybe it's, not just putting hashtags on things, but rather how do we have this discussion about sort of reconstructing this construct, that everyone feels that they have to assimilate to, and that's needs some work. So.
Yeah, and that's a big overwhelming thing, and you can certainly see why it's so much easier to blame the individual and just medicate them. I mean, that's easy to understand, but to actually change the constructs of what we're living in is like, how do we do that? Well, we have to start. Each one of us has to start to try, and we've started like within a friendship, and then in building outward with this project. And I think everybody needs to think about that in their own life. How are they going to start to personally change the construct just from their little tiny singular point in it?
And I always bring this up when this subject comes up, and I apologize, Padilla, for repeating myself, and she's had to hear me talk about this a lot, but I think that the way social media is set up right now is really dangerous, because people aren't posting their whole lives. They're posting the time they're on the yacht. They're posting the time that they have like a hot cocoa by the Christmas tree. They're posting pictures of them at parties with they're not posting the whole story. So when someone who's suffering is scrolling through these things and seeing all these lives that they're not living, do you know what I mean? It's like, and I, look, if I'm having a breakdown and sobbing, I too am not taking a selfie and putting it up and going, just living the human condition, folks. Everything's okay. You know what I mean? But it's like, it's almost set up, like people, and I myself included, with the work I do, and I try to write a healthy balance of keeping things private and keeping things open, and certainly work-related stuff is work-related stuff, but like I think by and large we've created what we call a compare and despair society, where we're flipping through pictures and wondering why our lives don't feel and look like that. We're not being aware that those people aren't posting the whole picture. It's a heavily edited life that you're looking at, And so I always think that's important to keep in mind or mention, because someone's scrolling through whatever platform they're on, maybe just having that awareness while they're looking through that could maybe make them feel a little bit less alone, because face it, none of us post ourselves in the fetal position after 42 hours crying, it's, I mean, some people do, and those are real cries for help that need, and hopefully their loved ones and friends are there to support them. But by and large, I feel that one of the reasons in why things have seemingly gotten more tragic in terms of the levels of mental health issues that are out there is a result of the fact that we're not getting the true story about people's lives from the people who are living them. And so and I'm not talking shit about social media or anything like that. I use it myself. I use it very limitedly, and I'm not dismissing anybody who does what they do. That's their life, that's fine. But I think that just having the awareness of the fact that this isn't the whole life, this isn't the whole experience, these are snapshots.
Yeah.
And everybody can come up with a great snapshot or two. Like, and the sickest individual among us could find a moment where he looks like he's living the time of his life. You know what
Oh
I
yeah,
mean?
for sure, for sure. Yeah, no, and that's a really good point. I mean, it's just having that perspective and like that sense of the reality of the situation, not the perceived reality. So yeah. So I was going to go on to ask about your kick-ass logo. We covered that. Let's get to the clothing though. So I'd like to hear about this clothing line, and just more about that. I feel like I think about that cliche, like, what is it, the suit makes the man, or however that goes, and I feel like what your line does is it really empowers someone to actually wear. I mean, they say you are what you eat, but perhaps in this case, it's you are what you wear. Like, you can put on something and actually, hey, like, this is my reality. What do you have to say about your clothing line that's so brilliant?
In that spirit, we started calling our shirts Wearable Proclamations.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
I feel when I see somebody in one of our designs, or I'm wearing one of our designs, I feel like I'm saying, or they're saying, I get it, and you're not alone. And it's really that simple. And on a strange level, we've almost tried to create an environment wherein, like, you know what? We're the cool kids now. You know what I mean?
Right.
This is the club, like this is
I think it's cool to say who you really are and what you're really struggling with.
Yeah.
And curate some views to make other people feel shitty, so you can feel better about yourself. It's a beautiful thing being honest in that way.
Yeah, and honesty, and we have another line that's coming out that's called Trauma Kids, and it's about all of us who've experienced trauma in our lives, and being vocal about that, and again saying that you're not alone if you're a trauma kid. I'm a trauma kid. PADHiA definitely is a trauma kid, and it's kind of a club, and it's the way I've always described it is it's a club that is very difficult to get into and nobody wants to join, but once you're in for life. You're a lifetime member, and so let's unite. And that's kind of where that's coming from, and I can't tell you how many people have identified with that, and it's almost rare. It's rare to find somebody who hasn't experienced trauma on some level or another, and even the ones that have had it really lucky their whole lives, we've just had 2 years of a global trauma. So now
that's true.
really the entire planet are potential applicants to join this club.
Yeah, that's true. I have to say, the way that you just described the club just gave me goosebumps, and to just in the way that you closed that description, just to say that you're not alone. This isn't what you wanted, but you're here now, and you're not alone anymore. And that's really beautiful.
Yeah, and I think one of the other pieces of that, and what we're trying to do with DD and in rebranding trauma as just something that's part of the human experience, but actually make it seem, maybe cool's not the right word, but in the sense that it gives you extra dimension, it gives you special abilities, it gives you additional compassion, it gives you an infinite well of weird creative ideas. I mean nobody wants trauma and would wish it on anybody, but once you've had it, you are infinitely expanded in so many ways, creatively, and in the way you can connect to others. So it's actually, you know, it's been stigmatized as this terrible, cursed thing. But the way that I've come to understand trauma through my million years of trying to overcome it is that it's really just a contraction around your life energy that happens due to whatever you experience. And it's not so much about the trauma, like it's setting you up for nature's mechanism of bursting forth. It's about the expansion that's able to happen after that deep contraction. Why does any contraction happen in the body or any system? It's to scatter further than you ever would have in your lifetime normally. So in starting to explore that through DD, we're giving people who've been told since day one that they are worth less because of things that have happened to them, we're telling them, no, actually, you're worth a lot more. You have a lot more abilities. And the contribution and the things that you can contribute are on just a whole other level.
I love that how you just spoke about the contraction and the expansion, like what can come of that. And as you said the word contraction, I of course think about when I, gave birth to my son, and man, that hella hurt. And like a contraction, but you think about what came from that, most beautiful thing in the world. And so it's interesting when we think about our lives that way, these traumas, these contractions that we go through, how we're able to absolutely produce something beautiful.
If I could speak to that on a personal level, and one of the reasons why I'm so honored to be working with PADHiA in this project is that when I was 15 years old, I suffered my biggest trauma, in my life, the one that informed a lot and changed my life in a lot of ways. And at 15, I'm 54 now. So at 15, it's 1983. There was no dialogue. There was no talking about this kind of stuff. And I cannot begin to describe you the loneliness and isolation and feeling outside and different and ashamed and alone and scared I felt, because there was no one else talking about these things. And, there was certainly no global communication then. But then you talk about the contraction and the expansion. Had it not been for that trauma, I would not have turned to music as a source of soothing, right? And I turned deeply to music as the source of soothing, which ultimately allowed me to have the life I have today, And so I'm just piggybacking on what PADHiA said in my own personal experience, like, who knows what would have happened, and in some strange, very difficult way to understand and a very difficult way to articulate and say and have it be understood. Like, of course, the trauma was terrible. Of course, I would never wish that to happen to anyone or myself, but I have to be forced to find some source of gratitude in it as well.
Yeah, it birthed an incredible human being and an incredible life. It really did. It was an implosion of the world that gave birth to this, all of the beauty of your existence.
And that's what I see in you, as PADHiA is probably one of the most brilliant human beings I know. She's a brilliant writer. She's a brilliant artist.
Yeah.
And I don't know that she would have the life and be the person she was had she not gone through those experiences and not had the ability to turn to those outlets to do something that is changing the landscape and making a huge impact on a lot of people. And so I have such great empathy and compassion for her story. And at the same time, I have a little bit of gratitude for it, because I have an amazing partner, an amazing friend, and probably one of the most brilliant people I've ever met in my life.
My gosh, thank you, Dave. That means so much coming from someone like you.
It's true. I didn't expect this to be a therapy session, but it's wonderful.
I want to hug you. Thank you.
You know, I would have put the mascara on today had I known this was going to happen this way.
Hey,
Forgot you too, Allie.
me either, by the way.
No, so beautiful. So I'm just gonna keep with these beautiful words by sharing the words that you shared. You asked, did I read the manifesto? Oh my goodness. So I'm going to read a portion of it for those who have not but need to. We celebrate honesty, realness. We wear our humanity proudly. This is from the Dual Diagnosis Manifesto in 197 words comprised of 1,148 characters. You make a powerful statement that, when I read it for the first time, improved my posture literally as I was reading it. What? The honesty of what we struggle with, then celebrate, is so incredibly articulated in a way that flips the script instantly to what we're used to hearing when it comes to mental health. So I love for the two of you to, and we've spoke about this, especially when we first started out with Love Me Anyways, but if there's anything more that you'd like to speak of with regard to the weight of words, whether they are the words that are being shared by someone else or the words that we use to define and describe our own feelings.
I think that's one of the big problems in the world and in the healing space, is that we don't have a lot of the language that we need. Like, language, words and phrases correspond to our neural circuits. So we tend to think in terms of words rather than actually looking within our personal human experience and trying to articulate how we really feel about things or how things have affected us. And so we're all out here connecting in these predefined words. And what we try to do in the writing is not say anything that's been said before, but actually look deeply in the present moment within to what's actually going on, what has actually happened in our life beyond what we've been diagnosed with, or however it's been pathologized. And I think that's why people feel such a strong connection, because we're reaching so deeply within and trying to articulate really deeply true stuff in new ways that it makes you think, because it's not in the pre-packaged phrases and ways of saying it, but it really like snaps people into the moment of, oh, I feel that. And instead of, oh, I'm thinking these words, I'm feeling like you're articulating something I'm feeling within. And that's really powerful. I think something I get angry about, like in the self-help space or yoga and meditation community, is I feel like they're saying the same buzzwords over and over again. You know, whether it's like the words sacred, divine, chakra, aura, like all these kinds of words. And what they don't realize is that 99% of the population, the second they hear those words, like their ear flaps close. They just they don't know what it means. It scares them. It sounds weird or whatever. And you can talk about all of those things like divine and light and healing and transformation without using words that shut people down just because of that they've been repeated so many times by certain communities. I think we have to realize, we have to start communicating in ways not just that the people within our demographic and community can understand, but like the kid growing up in a impoverished neighborhood with violence and addiction and all of that. Like, I want to speak about things that kid can hear. I want to say things in ways that kid can hear, not just the demographic of the people who typically buy this type of stuff or speak these words. Like, that's not important anymore. If we're gonna really start to heal the human organism, the human species, we've got to start, you know, like within an organism, if the cells stop communicating, it dies. That's what's happening, because we're all in our little bubbles saying our same words over and over again, and no one else wants to hear each other's words. And when we start digging into the truth of our experience, that starts to bridge the gap, and then we start all coming together.
And I'm just so grateful that you read part of that manifesto, because you know, earlier I said one of the things that PADHiA and I do is that we listen to each other, you know, and when we talk, we really extract really valuable gems from one another, even if the other one isn't aware of it. And that manifesto, which every time I read it hits me really hard, a lot of that came from dialogue. A lot of it came from you know, passing back and forth ideas and notes. And you know, we're both very much in that manifesto, our words and our thoughts, but as I said a few minutes ago, all of the sentence structure, all of the writing, all of what you're looking at came from this woman. And that's what I was saying earlier, is that she has had a really, you know, tumultuous life. I don't know if I'm using that word right, but it feels right. And when we're talking about the expansion and the contraction, like, that's what we get, you know. I identify with everything in there. I contributed a lot of what's in there, but just the brilliant way in which she puts pen to paper and expresses a concept is something that I am constantly in awe of.
Thank you.
Well, I would say, certainly many of us are. I remember when I first read it, and it's, you know, those things that you see or that you read where you have to stop what you're doing. You have to stand up and physically go and say, look, or listen to someone. And that's what that was for me. Like, Jack, come here, I gotta show you this. Yeah, so words are powerful. So how thankful are we that the two of you are doing what you're doing, using them the way that you are, and for the reason you are. You know, so we're gonna switch gears one more time. So it was our great pleasure to meet I, who share the cover with you. Please tell us their story and their role in dual diagnosis. I'm super curious.
Wow, I. Well, it's an uppercase I and a lowercase I. And I don't know if you had an opportunity to see the short film on our website.
No, I don't think so. I don't think I saw the film about it.
Yeah, there's when you load the website, there will be a play now, and it'll take you to like a 3-4 minute film. And PADHiA, you can take this and I'll expand upon it later, but they are our mascots, and they are our warriors, and they are also examples of finding community, and that's what I'll say. But I'm gonna leave it to you, PADHiA, to explain who they are and how they.
Okay. Yeah, so we had that conversation that we were laughing over about being dressed up self-care style, and Dave was like, oh, we got to make a shirt that says that. We've got to make a shirt. And so we started talking about making a shirt, and then I thought, well, we should make a character to kind of tell these kind of stories that we're trying to tell. So we were just looking at different styles of characters of, you know, what are we trying to say of people that feel isolated and disconnected and layered in all of their defense mechanisms and the things they're taking on and just feel really unplugged from humanity. And so we were looking at different types of images, and we discovered these I don't know if they were from the 1700s or what, but the vintage diving suits where they're just so thick and layered and have these weird gaskets and the tubes, and you're kind of in your own atmosphere, bringing your own atmosphere with you down into the depths to try to explore and make sense of things. And I think we both feel that way in life often. And so we started with Big Eye, and then I don't know how Little Eye came about. I think we found another vintage diving suit, and he was in a box on wheels, and that was really cool too.
So in the film, you see a character, a woman who has a traumatic experience, and as a result of that traumatic experience, creates her own environment to live in for safety. Because really, if you're in a suit like that, no one can actually touch you. You have your own air, you're protected, you feel safe, but you're isolated, and which can be very, very dangerous. And this character goes through this little journey and finds another character that has gone through the same thing and built their own environment, and they meet up and they find each other, and through their trauma, and I guess once again going back to the contraction and expansion, they start to create their own world, their own reality that is happy and makes sense to them. And even the other friends that they've created in that world tie back into the logo. They created characters using that same old Rorschach ink blot method. So you'll see at the end of the film, they have all these little friends they made, but they're all archaic psychiatric tools that they were used. But in this space, they become sources of light in their lives. So there's definitely a story that's worth looking at. And I didn't mean to give away the ending, but you know, it's only 3 or 4 minutes. And yeah, that's the story of those two. And I think that I don't know if we ever consciously thought this, or if we ever said this, or ever wanted it to be this way, but I always view those two characters as me and PADHiA.
Well,
yeah, we realized that way after the fact. That was funny, and we were like, holy shit, that's kind of like us. And I remember, Dave, you were like, has everyone else been thinking this the whole time? we never realized that. It was hilarious.
But
I think
it is true in the
Go ahead.
sense that we both had these life experiences, and we met each other, and we have created our own world, you know?
Yeah, it's true. I know. We were living it.
That wouldn't exist. So I wouldn't say that those two characters are us specifically, but they are very closely representative of how we work together and work. It's just and it was not with any, and I think that there's, you know, there's really an organic nature of how that's connected, because it wasn't on purpose. You know, we were trying to tell one story and realized we were telling our story, and 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 it was just like we were in my garage, I think, or something. And we were just like, wait a minute here. Now I understand why these characters are making sense to me. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
That is amazing. And yeah, and I love, again, I mean, just the words you use to define and describe these characters, you know, with needing to bring their own sort of atmosphere, their own safety. They had to create their own safety in order to go and to explore these depths the ways that we do.
Yeah. And they want to be out in the world on adventures and creating and connecting, but they just can't quite do it like everyone else. But they're doing it in their own way, and it's still really beautiful. So I think that just really drives home the point we're trying to make with all of this.
Well, it's really brilliant. You know, so when we talk about you know, the pandemic, it's a bitch. Some have found big wins and others only losses. So question now, for those who are struggling, and we've talked about this for a moment, with the isolation that comes from COVID, what advice would you have? If there was one piece of advice that you could give to someone who's feeling just so alone and so connected with this other reality that has become so new for all of us, what would you say?
Well, I would say that it's important to stay as connected as possible to those around you that support you and love you. I would say that it's pretty vital to find something that you can be passionate about and immerse yourself in that. I don't know how I would have handled, especially the first year of it. I don't know if I would have made it the way I made it had I not turned to music and art and the people and the community, whether it be a community, it can be a community of two people, just some semblance of safety and an open, vulnerable dialogue, because people are very afraid. A lot of people are very afraid of being vulnerable. We found that, or I found, and I don't want to speak for PADHiA at all, but I think that we found that in allowing ourselves to be vulnerable comes great strength, it's almost a superpower. Because if you can identify and talk openly about what's really going on honestly, then you get into solution. And you can't get into solution until you're actually willing to be that vulnerable and say, this is how I'm feeling, this is what's going on. And so for me, remaining vulnerable, remaining open, and nurturing my passions was salvation for me. It was the only way I could do it. And even still, it was hard. You know what I mean? Even still, it was hard. It's still hard. As I told you, I'm just now on the other side of this new strain, and there's a lot of fear in the world. Like, okay, the whole world's going to get Omicron, and then we're going to have herd immunity, but like, there might be another strain coming. You know what I mean? Like, so we don't. You know what I mean? It's so I would say that connectedness and community for me are what my answers would be.
Yeah. No, that's great.
I don't know if PADHiA has a different answer.
Yeah, I honestly think what you said is absolutely perfect, and I don't have anything to add to it, because I've honestly, this entire pandemic been a crumpled, frozen mess. So take all of Dave's advice on that.
Right. No, I totally hear you. There is one more question that I had put together for today and for this conversation. Shifting gears a bit more. So here we are in this new year, with new days to get up, clean up our lives, as this is dry January that's now underway. So with those who choose to challenge themselves by giving up alcohol for the month, we come to the topic of addiction. And whether it be alcohol, drugs, sex, addictions can ruin people's lives. So wondering if there's any personal stories that you could share or any personal advice that you can give to those who don't even know where to begin.
Well, it's very difficult to give out this kind of advice on a group level like this, on a public platform like this, because it is such an individual thing. But what I can say is that, again, community support, reaching out, there are a myriad of free resources out there that offer communities, 12-step groups, cognitive therapy, sometimes rehabilitation centers, and more so than even speaking about how to give up on substance abuse. What I would really like to emphasize is that the influx of fentanyl into this country has caused the overdose rates to skyrocket. The numbers have never been higher because it is such a deadly thing. And what's happening is it's finding its way into all the pills that are on the street, because people press pills now. So what looks like it came from a pharmacy didn't come from a pharmacy. It came from a factory where they're pressing pills that emulate what Xanax feels like, that emulate what OxyContin feels like, but it's not those chemicals, and or very little bit of those chemicals. So we're entering into a phase where the street drugs right now are more deadly than they've ever been. In fact, it's my understanding that it's difficult to find heroin, just straight up heroin now, because it all has fentanyl in it. And one of the things that is so scary about it is that during the manufacturing progress, if you think about when you bake a cake and you mix the batter and then you pour the batter into whatever cookware you're going to use, sometimes you'll notice at the bottom of the bowl that there's a bunch of granules that didn't get mixed in quite properly, right? It's the nature of just, how that happens. But with the fentanyl, if you take those granules that didn't get mixed in properly and they find their way into a single fake Xanax bar, it's going to kill somebody. So I always like to put that warning out more than speaking about how to get clean, because there are a number of different ways and they're different for everybody else. And I found, like, through the grace of God, my own way out. And I'll be even more honest with you, it's still hard. So I just wanted to put that warning out there since we're on the subject. I don't know if you have anything to speak on the addiction side of things.
Yeah, I do. Trying to think how to say it. I don't personally struggle with addiction. I've been around it my whole life. My mother, most of my friends. I've spent a lot of time in addiction healing communities. And what I really want to say, and I don't know that this exactly answers your question, but it's a perspective. It's like anyone who struggles with it, it's another area. There's such stigma, and you're a junkie, and you're a hardcore addict, and you're this, and you're that, and that's how we regard people. And it seems that people in recovery have to label themselves and own all of that as part of their recovery, which I understand, and I'm not condescending that, but I think there's a greater perspective on this, where if you look at someone who uses drugs, if you zoom way out, look at what they're trying to achieve. They're trying to transcend tremendous pain. They're trying to feel their energy powerfully participating in these other realms, in these creative, inspiring realms that don't exist in reality. And that kind of intention is brilliant. It's beautiful. Everyone should have that drive. And yeah, okay, having that drive and then going out and doing drugs obviously is going to ruin your life. But I think it's an area where we need to look below the surface and see what's actually going on, and find ways to, again, adjust the world to meet those people, because anyone I've ever known that struggled with addiction has been some form of genius, has had the most incredible, beautiful energy that just flows out of them uncontrollably. We don't learn any tools for like energetic self-regulation. They don't know how to regulate it and translate it into the world in healthy ways, and it's almost like they're too much for the world around them. The world can't support it, so they have to either get high or use anxiety and depression to regulate their energy. And again, I think it's a function of the environment is sick, not the person. The person had a very, very healthy intention. And there is a beauty in that. And I hate to see the shame that's within that community.
I was going to add that one of the things that they're finding more and more as science and studies progress is that a lot of addiction and alcoholism stems from one's intention to self-soothe because there is trauma in their pasts.
Yes.
9 out of 10 addicts have a traumatic past, and it's their attempt at self-soothing. So
absolutely, and that's a healthy intention. The doing the drugs part isn't, but wanting to live in a soothed, comforted state, in a reality where you can experience the feelings that you were born to have, is really well thinking.
Yeah, no, and it's true. And I think that is the issue, right? Is that our society is so tethered to the outcome of a situation or the outcome of a circumstance, as opposed to recognizing or validating that intention.
And it's like we have the opioid crisis and the fentanyl crisis and this crisis, and they address each one. And meth, is wreaking havoc on everyone, and it's like, good luck. You can get rid of all the opioids, but until you get rid of the pain that and have the support for the trauma healing to do the work to get to the expansion, to where you don't need the drugs to find that false sense of expansion. We're not making any progress by shutting down one crisis because we haven't addressed the underlying issues.
Exactly.
Absolutely agree. We're looking at these siloed symptoms of things as opposed to the whole person that is there.
Yeah.
Wow, you two, mind blown. I have so enjoyed our time today, this discussion, everything. Can't thank you enough both for sharing. It just means the world. I just can't thank you enough for helping all of us become a bit more aware now. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you.